when I'm writing the Koenig book, I want to get back to Poe. And when I'm writing Poe, I'm thinking, actually, I wouldn't mind writing Ben Koenig fighting a bear, which is what I'm writing now. He's actually fighting a bear.
Hello and welcome to The Conversation with Nadine Matheson. And not only is it a warm hello, it is a happy new year because this is the first episode of 2025. And most importantly, this is the 100th episode of The Conversation with Nadine Matheson. And I can't believe that we're here. I can't believe that this episode featuring my guest, M.W. Craven, is my 100th conversation. This podcast will have been going for 2 years. In a couple of weeks, it will be our 2-year anniversary. So it just leaves me to say thank you so much. Thank you to everyone who's listened. Thank you to everyone who's shared and followed and left a comment. I'm really grateful. And I'm just really pleased that you keep coming back for more. So continue doing what you're doing. Continue listening and continue sharing. And before I forget, because I always forget, there are other ways in which you can continue to support The Conversation with Nadine Matheson podcast. One of the easiest ways is simply to buy me a cup of coffee. And you can do that by going to the link in the show notes, which will take you to my Ko-fi page. And what that will do will allow you to support the podcast and help me keep this podcast going. So I'm going to say thank you in advance. Now let's get on with the show. As I mentioned earlier, I'm in conversation with the award-winning and best-selling author of the Washington Post series and the Ben Koenig series, M.W. Craven. And in our conversation, we talk about being at the right place at the right time, how his previous job in probation influenced his storytelling, and what it means to be responsible as an author. And we also have some tips for the debut authors out there. Now, as always, sit back or go for a walk and enjoy the conversation. M.W. Craven, welcome to The Conversation.
Happy to be here, Nadine.
Glad to have you. Right, my first question for you is because when I was reading your very, 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 very extensive bio, my question was, how would you describe your writing journey so far and your publishing journey?
I mean, I think Mick Herron said this quite recently, that not a lot of people talk about how important luck is in publishing. And I feel as though I've kind of always been in the right place at the right time, luckily for me. So it kind of started off with my dog, which is a weird place to start. My dog. I'll explain this better than just say it's my. I'm an author because of my dog, but it's kind of true.
It's a first time.
I was due to go and see an author called Matt Hilton in Waterstones in Carlisle. But it all meant an early start because we were going somewhere that day. And I'd kind of given up on the idea. My dog, for some reason, started barking like an idiot about 3 a.m. at a non-existent burglar or a ghost or something. So I ended up getting up a lot earlier than I ordinarily would have. So I actually made this book signing. At this book signing, I met this bloke called Graham Smith, who runs a crime writing course in Gretna, which I'd never met Graham before. I talked to him, and it happened to start the next weekend, and he said, come along. So I did. I met my first publisher there, and I enjoyed it. I went to the next one. I met my agent there. So it's all, I mean, you kind of make your own luck, I suppose, but that's the journey I had. So I don't have a whole stack of rejection letters or anything like that. I've only had, David actually has, my agent. He had a stack of rejection letters when he was submitting the puppet show. But from my point of view, I've kind of sailed through the whole process, which is weird. It makes me a bit of an outlier.
It does, but and everyone's journey is so different, because even when people ask about my journey, it's long in a sense in that I've always been writing on and off, but in terms of submitting the manuscript and getting signed and then getting a publishing deal, that is very, very, it's so short. It's literally from December 2019 and then signing with an agent in January 2019 and getting the deal in March. Yeah, so it's very quick, but then it's that right place, right time sort of thing. Because I was doing a course and then meeting agents as well. And then my tutor, he introduced me to, gave me his agent's details. So there's a lot of things I was able to maybe to avoid, I suppose, all those other obstacles. But everyone's journey is different.
It is, but when I'm asked to give advice to people, which I frequently do, and if I want to just go above the right, and read Stephen King's All Right and kind of thing, I do say get out to the festivals and meet as many people as you can and just engage, because it's quite a collegiate community, crime writing, the crime community.
Yeah.
And that's because we, people who read crime read more than one crime book a year, so we're not in competition with each other. If you're in the poetry business, then by all means you do need to stab each other in the back, because there's only about 6 poetry books sold a year. So it's
there's a movie there, right? There's a film there, there's a book in there. Poets killing each other.
The poetry book murders. Yeah. You can have that if you want.
Oh, thank you so much. I wasn't thinking about cozy crime or literary, but I'll take it.
I'm sure you can make it as dark as you wanted. It's kind of true. I've met pretty much every crime writer I have wanted to meet, and everyone has been absolutely lovely, and they've all been happy to stop and chat. And this was before I was a crime writer. I remember door-stopping Michael Rebotham at one of the first Harrogates I went to. He didn't know me from Adam. I didn't have a publishing deal or anything. I stopped him, me and my wife did, and we were both readers of his. Well, we still are readers of Michael Rebotham. Who isn't, I suppose. And it was lovely, and he stayed for about 45 minutes just chatting to us. I mean, where else would you get that? It's a lovely community to be part of, and if you do want to be a crime writer, then you need to join that community. Otherwise, you're going to be lobbing stuff in from the outside, and you don't have all those advantages of making the connections that we've just been talking about.
I remember the first crime festival I ever went to was Crime Fest, and it was 2018. And the only reason why I went, because I was doing the creative writing masters, and you could specialize in.
I was that was my first crime festival.
Was it really? Yeah. Well, I spent the night. I can't remember what night it was, the Friday night or the Sunday night or the Saturday night, like 1 o'clock in the morning, chatting and drinking with Martina Cole. It's
that's a very good example, actually, because Martina Cole is a giant of the genre. 7-figure advances routinely. I mean, she's just a phenomenon, isn't she? And she's absolutely the most approachable person.
Yeah.
You can, and she's dead funny, and she's dead down to earth. But 2018, I did, and I wasn't even going to go. My publisher wanted me, because the Puppet Show was out that year.
Yeah.
And we went. It was a month before publication, but they managed to get some early copies. So it was the first time I'd actually seen my book, a hardback book kind of thing. And I did a panel with Ellie Griffiths, and I mean, I've kept in touch with Ellie ever since, and we're kind of pals. And it was just a lovely experience, and I didn't know anyone. I mean, we just wouldn't know anyone. But
I didn't know anyone.
I'm still friends with now. I mean, it's just that kind of thing. Harrogate was the first crime festival I went to, and when I tell people about Harrogate, I always say you have a different Harrogate every single time you go. It's not the same festival, because it's more people every time you go. You know people that you met for the first time the previous year, kind of thing. So it grows and grows and grows. Sometimes you can't spend as much time with people that you used to spend time. When I was going back in 2013, 2014, you could end up spending 6 or 7 hours with the same person, because you only knew 5 or 6 people.
That's true.
Now you know about 300 people.
I remember my first Harrogate. I went in, and I'd gone with, who did I go with? I think I went with my friend Patricia, who's also an author. So it was me and her kind of stuck together, and then we formed another little crew of people who was their first times as well. And as you said, it was just us, our tight little crew for those 2-3 days. And then I think the last time I went to Harrogate, it took me, and I'm not even lying, it took me an hour to get out of the tent. I said I was leaving at whatever time it was. And it took me an hour just to even get to the tent door, because you're just stopping and talking to people. Yeah. So it changes each time.
It absolutely does. I did a panel for the first time this year, actually. In fact, we're on the same panel, obviously.
Yeah, was that the first time?
Yeah. That's just the way it happens. I mean, Chris Whitaker hadn't done the panel until that year anyway, and he'd won it a couple of years before.
Yeah, he had.
So the first time I was actually on the stage was when I actually won the award in 23. But I had a hell of a time getting out of the signing tent. There was only me there at the end. And that was the Murder and Harrogate book. People took for this book, which they'd been buying the Murder and Harrogate anthology, which I was getting no money for whatsoever. So it was kind of annoying as well, because it wasn't my royalties, it was Sam Eads' royalties that she was getting. But it's just lovely. I love Harrogate. I love all the festivals, actually. There's no festivals that I don't enjoy. There's some I look forward to more than others, depending on what kind of mood I'm in at the time. I'm going to Newcastle this afternoon, and I happen to be in Newcastle at the same time as Newcastle Noir. I'm not actually going to Newcastle Noir, although I'll probably stick my head in tomorrow at some point, because I'm going to see a band. But I'll no doubt meet up with a load of writers in the city, because I know that they're there, and they know I'm coming as well, because everyone's so nosy, aren't they?
Our lives are online. When did you know this is what you wanted, though, to be not just a writer, but to be a crime writer? Because I can think about, I knew I wanted to write, and I was interested in crime, but I can't think of when I decided, no, this is really, really what I want.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Have you always written crime? Is that the only thing you've written?
No, God, no. I've written speculative fiction. I've done, if you want to call them, rom-coms and family dramas. I've done all sorts of random. I've got, I don't think I'm the first and last person who's going to have a really poor film script that they wrote in uni because they watched Pulp Fiction. But but the crime stuff, I think I always knew I was going to, but I just probably didn't have the confidence to. It just felt like a challenge.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of started down the fantasy path. I was reading, because I still am into Lord of the Rings and that kind of thing. So I'm one of the, actually, I'm not one of the few people, but when Game of Thrones was on TV, I knew that Ned Stark was going to get his head chopped off, because I'd read the books years before.
Not surprised.
I remember Stephen King saying, it's not a spoiler to say this, the books have been around for 20 years. But so I started off writing fantasy, but I was also reading crime. I was a still am a big Ed McBain fan, and I collect first edition Ed McBains and kind of thing. And then, so I was writing on and off ever since I can remember, to be honest. But when it came to doing it properly, I thought, I'm a probation officer. That kind of gives me a little hook. Sammy, you're a barrister or a solicitor? Barrister, aren't you?
Solicitor advocate.
Right, okay. That's a kind of hybrid. That's a hybrid thing.
It's a hybrid.
For my days, you can argue in Crown Court.
I do.
I'm dredging my memory here.
I do the Crown Court appearances. I got my wig and gown.
I saw it.
Yeah,
I saw it a couple of times last year.
You did?
Or this year? Sorry.
This year was this year.
Yeah, you was it you cross-examining me, or was it Helen? I can't remember.
I can't.
Anyway.
No, I think I did. I think, oh God, who knows? It was the summer, but I think I did. So I thought I'll give crime writing a go. And also I had read about the CWA's debut dagger competition, and I thought, well, that seems dead easy, 3,000 words. Because I was used to writing 3-sentence reports, which were around about that long anyway, and usually I could do them in about 2 hours. Which is why most of my offenders went to prison. Obviously 3,000 words and a 1,000 word synopsis is not easy at all, but I took a couple of weeks off work and I did it. Then I got shortlisted, and it was kind of at that point I thought, well, actually, this was a huge surprise to get shortlisted. And went down to London and we met Lee Child and Frederick Forsyth, and there was probably all sorts of people who I know very well now were there at the dinner. I know David Headley was at that dinner. Obviously, I didn't know him then because it was way before I'd met him. And at that point, I thought, I'm going to focus on crime writing. I'm just going to give this a go because I enjoy writing it anyway. An agent had asked to see the completed manuscript, so I said, and I'd only written 3,000 words, but I told
I say a white lie. My wife says it was just a complete lie. There was no white lie about it. You had written
Trying to dress
3,000
it up.
words. Yeah. So I said, it's not quite finished. And she said, how long are you going to need? I said, 6 months. And I wrote it, and it was absolutely dreadful. And it was 150,000 words long. It kind of morphed into a conspiracy. It started out as a bog standard crime book in Cumbria, ended up in a war crime thing in Afghanistan. It was absolutely awful. But this agent read it, and she gave me some incredibly useful feedback. She said, well, I can't take you on. So so I do have a rejection letter, actually.
Yeah.
My wife said, why don't you get back and tell her to piss off, bloody? And I said, no, this is really good feedback, this. I'll take it on. I completely rewrote it. At that point, I met Graham Smith, and I met a guy called Darren Laws, who was the chief exec or the owner of Caffeine Nights Publishing. And I give him this book with the CWA shortlisted little sticker on it that you get. And he bought it. So that's kind of how I started down the crime writing journey. But I could have just as easily been a fantasy writer. And fantasy doesn't have as many obstacles. You've got the world building element, obviously. But if you're writing police procedurals set in the UK, you need to know a little bit about how that world operates. You just can't because UK crime readers are so knowledgeable. They'll spot a fraud immediately.
That's the thing. And I think, and I don't know if it's unique, probably not unique to the UK. Probably the same applies maybe in the States. But I just think in the UK growing up, you're just constantly inundated with like crime in all sorts of settings, whether it was like I'm saying Crown Court, because that's what I do remember watching Crown Court when I was little, because it was on during the day. So probably when you're sick from school and Crown Court's on. So you're watching Crown Court, and then Inspector Morse is on, then the Bills on, what else? Yeah, Cavan QC, and it's just continuous.
And Juliet Bravo for me.
Yeah, oh my god, yeah, Juliet Bravo, the Sweeney, like you could go on. So you feel like like you have this inside information. And I think you're right. People can detect a fraud, which I think this is why I avoided writing legal thrillers, because I just thought it's going to be and it sounds really strange to say because that's my world, but I thought I'm not thinking about the reader. I'm thinking about people I know, because I know that I have to bend things a little bit. I have to bend the rules a little bit to make it fit with the story. And I thought, I'm not ready to have people I know calling me again, Nadine, this is not right. I'm like, no. So I'll do police procedures.
Yeah, I'm kind of lucky because my books are set in Cumbria, and it's a very small police force covering a huge area. So there's a lot of multitasking going on with certain roles, so I can kind of get away with the same person doing roles which would all be distinct jobs in the Met, for example. So the case manager and the exhibits officer and things, which are all unique roles and distinct roles in bigger forces, are quite often the same person in a small force. I mean, if there's a murder in Cumbria and it's unsolved for any length of time, you could have half the force working on it, because it's quite a small force. There's only about 1,000 in total, and that probably includes the civilian stuff. Whereas in the Met, where you've got 10,000, and that's just just the warranted officers.
I think that's why I created like my fictional unit, because I mean, I've got my little fictional unit, which has got, I think, 6 people in it. 6 or 7, I think it's got in it. And they're pursuing like serial crime cases, which should take a whole massive force, but it's 6 of them. But I thought if I create this little fictional unit, I can have them, they literally are doing the multitasking. And I couldn't have got away.
I kind of stumbled across this weird little unit in the National Crime Agency called the Serious Crime Analysis Section. And I adopted it as my own. And the actual unit themselves, it's all academics, and they look at data, and the remit is to identify emerging serial killers and serial rapists, but they're all civilians, and there's about half a dozen of them. And I sort of pinched that, and I put Poe in that, and I give it a little bit of a structure and give it a far more of I give it an investigative role, a lot for that reason. So because my first series was very much a police procedural. He was a DI. in the kind of company's equivalent of a major case team. This one is very much just Poe and Tilly just arsing about, basically, but they're not part of the official investigation, so they can go and do what they want. They've always got to report to someone, and sometimes it works because you can have a clash, and that works. Obviously, no conflict works very well. Sometimes they'll get on with who they're working. It depends how you particularly want to play that scene or a chapter or the entire book. So I've kind of done the same thing as you, albeit my unit is a real unit. I've got no idea what they think of the way I portray them. I think I'm quite flat then, because they've had some huge wins, but they come across as quite buffoonish sometimes. I describe one of them as getting out of breath going to the fridge because they're proper nerds. But
well, I have people asking me if the unit's real, my serial crimes unit, and I'm like, no. As far as I know, it is not real at all. But like if I go back to your probation days, because when you're talking about your PSR reports, it's only been like not even 3,000 words. And I used to remember thinking when I was writing briefs for council, I used to remember doing the briefs and preparing my clients' instructions, doing their proofs. I used to remember thinking, this is just a story. Like the whole thing, preparing the brief from beginning, middle to end, it's all story. It's all storytelling. Do you think you was aware of that in a funny way when doing your reports?
Kind of, I suppose, because we obviously in those days it doesn't happen now because it's a kind of they've trimmed it down now, so it's a much more watered down version of pre-sentence reports. But when I was a probation officer, you had to meet with the offender. Sometimes you had to meet with them twice. So there was a lot of prison visits and things if they were remanded. And then after those interviews and after some quite difficult interviews and some quite challenging questions, you would form a view of what you wanted to happen to this guy because your recommendation was invariably followed. Yeah, particularly on the borderline cases where there could be custody, might not be custody. Obviously, if someone has just been caught abusing a child, then they're going away for that how long, and then you just need to inform the judge about how his risk can be managed, what programs he needs to do in prison, that kind of thing. But you kind of formed a view, and depending on what view you wanted to take, you would slant your report as in this guy needs to go to prison without overtly saying it, because you still had to give all options. If the judge, because you get instructions from the court saying all options are open, or they might say we're thinking the custody kind of thing. If we think the custody, and then you think actually this can be managed in the community, then you do have to tell a story about why they can pull back, and vice versa. If they're thinking of a community sentence, you think actually this fucking idiot needs to go to prison, then that's a different story. So yeah, you do, and then you kind of get, after the first 30 of them, you kind of get your head around what works and what works for you, what kind of thing, and how you want to present an argument exactly the same as you do, I imagine. And most times my recommendation was followed. I can't actually remember any times, any occasion that it wasn't. But then again, I wasn't going for weird and wacky solutions. I wasn't saying that a child murderer could be managed with 100 hours of community service. I was, it was an important job. It was, and I've been in court where defence solicitors had met their client for the first time that day, and they, in mitigation, just read out the pre-sentence report. I thought, well, you've earned your £3,000, mate, haven't you?
No, but it happened to me more than once. It's like, so-and-so can't do it. I need you to go and cover a sentence. And you're like, it's annoying because it's not your case. So you haven't sat down with the client for God. No, sometimes these cases they're going on for like 6 months plus. So you haven't sat down with your client. You don't even think about it. And you're meeting for the first time outside the court. And you have to do so much work in a short space of time. You get acquainted with the file, trying to keep your client on your side because they're like, I don't know you. And then you've got to read this PSR and you're like, oh, crap. They're saying you're going to prison. And the worst thing that to annoy me is when, you spend time with your client and I would advise them, how best to approach their appointment with probation. Take responsibility, be remorseful. And you see the report, they've done the complete opposite. And you're like, you twat. You twat. Now I have to go and try and mitigate this somehow in court.
Yeah. I mean, I remember because we used to get pre-sentence reports. I think that the magistrates, particularly it's mainly a magistrate thing, they used to use it as a way to adjourn for the pre-sentence report. I remember interviewing a farmer who had set fire to some tyres. I mean, that was his crime. I can't remember what the crime was. Some sort of illegal setting fire to tyres crime. I mean, it was pretty niche. And
environmental, maybe.
Yeah, it was something like that. He turned up in his blue overalls, covered in mud, wellies, saying, "Do I need my solicitor here?" I said, "You've been convicted, mate. I mean, this is your chance to tell me why your fine should be 20 quid, not 30 quid. I mean, it was that kind of thing. I mean, when I say my report's on average about 3,000 words, that one was about 200 words. It was like, don't waste my time, please, magistrates. You can do some things you can do on your own.
I know.
But I did a report on a child. He'd been caught in Cumbria. He was a Manchester resident, and but he'd been caught luring children into his tent in Cumbria, which got local police involved. They arrested him, and he was charged. They went back to his house with the help of Manchester police and discovered this whole trove of horrific stuff. And he ended up getting charged with about 15. He'd been videoing himself. He'd been like a handyman for a housing association, so he had access to houses. And he was. Wow. It was. I'm not even going to say what it was, because it was so horrific. I got the report, and I took a probation, like a trainee kind of thing. I thought this would be a good experience, and also means I don't have to actually write it. I'll just read it and then offer some suggestions. And that was an all-day interview. So we did like 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the afternoon in Durham. And at the end, I thought, this guy can't ever get out of prison. He's just too dangerous. He just doesn't see what he's done wrong, for a start. So I think he had a mild learning disability. He is actively looking for ways to offend. So he's a predatory paedophile, and his victims were aged from like 15 down to 2 months, that kind of age. So he wasn't. You couldn't put in a management plan for him would have just been absolutely impossible. So I thought, I need this guy to get a life sentence, because one of his offences was enough to attract a life sentence. I can't remember which one it was. It wasn't a mandatory life sentence. It wasn't attempted murder or something like that. Yeah. And so I had to tell a real story. Then I had to explain it to the judge, and we got thanked in court actually for such an in-depth report. And he got a life sentence with a tariff of about 11 years or something like that. And he was old enough that I knew because all the stuff that came out that we weren't privy to after sentence, about some of the things that he'd been videoing himself doing, that wasn't illegal behaviour, but it was very worrying behaviour. The parole boards and everyone involved in the parole board would have had access to that. They would have had access to all the police steps, all my pre-sentence report. That guy would never have been deemed safe to be managing the community. So he'd have died in prison. He would be dead by now, because he was getting on a bit back in those days. So that's one extreme. And the tyre guy is probably the other extreme, little farmer worrying that he's going to incriminate himself after he's been convicted.
But that's how it was, though, isn't it? It's like it goes from both ends of the spectrum, where, I was, in the magistrate's court because my client's been arrested for stealing literally a bag of potatoes and a bottle of whiskey from Sainsbury's. It's like, it was so farcical. And another guy who just got completely drunk on New Year's Eve and went into Sainsbury's and stole lots of champagne. He has no memory of it. And they caught him in Gatwick Airport trying to get to Amsterdam. It was just so farcical. So it'll go from that end to, as you said, the worst kind of sexual offences and the murders. But I was sitting here, while you're talking, and I'm listening, and I'm thinking, other people who have no experience of this world, they probably think, how can you do this day in, day out? And it doesn't, we can just talk about it the way we talk about it. And I always say, I think you either learn very quickly to compartmentalize, or you're just able to do that. That's just naturally how you are. You think that's with you?
I absolutely think that. I also think having a dark sense of humour helps enormously. And also, there is the lighter side of this. I mean, it's not all darkness and things. There are some funny. I mean, attending magistrate court is actually quite amusing sometimes, particularly in Cumbria, where they're all like local. I remember sitting in court where someone wasn't paying his fines and he'd been lifted by the police drunk, sat in a puddle. And the magistrate said, if you can afford to get bladdered, you can afford to pay your fine. And just wouldn't let us fine. I remember a defence solicitor dropping his papers, bent down to pick it up, farted, dead loud, obviously by accident, got up and then said, sorry, mum. Just things like that, which kind of become legendary. But then you've got the dark side. So everyone finds the coping mechanism, and we're kind of on the periphery of it, aren't we? We hear about it and we read about it. We don't actually see it. So, I mean, the police officers that we talk about are actually living it firsthand. So, I mean, they burn out because they don't have any good days. I mean, that's the thing that they tell you is there's no good days in the police. You're seeing people at their worst.
Yeah.
And or on their worst, sometimes at their worst, and sometimes on their worst days when you got
on their worst day,
someone's died or something like that, or there's been a car crash, or they've been burgled, or you know exactly what I'm talking about. So I mean, it's not surprising that police officers, all with almost without exception, can't wait to retire. There's very few of them I think. And I'd love to be swimming in the mud until I'm 70. You don't find that.
No, you don't. You definitely don't find that. I was just remembering when being at Southwestern Magistrates Court, you said you have those funny moments. For me, and in Southwestern Magistrates Court, the chairs, it was an old-fashioned court, so the seat would flip up or flip down, one of the two. And I thought the seat was already down. So I think I was standing up doing my submission. I thought the seat was already down. I went to sit down. I just landed straight on the floor. And the judges were like, Miss Matheson, are you okay? And I'm lifting my hands up. Yeah, I'm fine. I'm fine. Let's just go on with it.
I was in Crown Court once doing a verbal report for a judge on a drug treatment testing order. So this is when they were just in. So you had to go every month and basically say how this guy was doing. And I turned my mobile off. It was one of those old brick Nokia ones, the indestructible ones that the battery lasted for 6 years. And so I turned it off like a good little probation officer. I'd forgotten I'd set an alarm for something or other. I think it was probably a recurring alarm. And I didn't know this either. Nokias turn themselves on if there's an alarm. So suddenly I'm doing that. My mobile just started bleating away, because the Nokia was really loud. It was like a fire alarm. And I didn't know. I was looking around trying to blame someone, and everyone's looking at me. Well, it's not me. My phone's off, and they said it's. And the judge was getting really, really angry. So just things like that. I mean, but everyone's got stories like that.
Yeah, everyone's got
whatever part of it you work. Everyone has stories like that, and that's kind of the gold that we can pick out of the river of mud that we've been talking about. These little things that humanize it in the books and make it real, so that other people, so your colleagues, when they're reading it, and say, yes, I remember that happened to such and such. Someone fell over in court and all these things. So I've put in things that I know have happened. I've changed the name sometimes. Sometimes I leave it in as the actual name. So that's so go back to the question, whatever it was, which I think was why you're writing crime. That's why.
Yeah, baby. That's why. I'm still always amused when I get an old client's found me, normally on LinkedIn, on Facebook, and they've asked, I found your book. Am I in your book? I'm like, no, you're not in my book. No, we're not. I'm not accepting your friend request. That is not happening.
Meet up for coffee.
No, not at all. Not at all. Listeners, it's time for a very short break. If you're enjoying this conversation with Nadine Matheson and want to help keep the podcast going, why not buy me a cup of coffee? Your support goes such a long way in keeping these conversations flowing. Just check out the link in the show notes. You've had the two different experiences of being with an independent publisher and being with, I say the Big Five. What did being with the independent publisher, like, what did that teach you? Also, what did it prepare you for when the awards came and the success came and the bestseller status came?
It's the big thing I took out of it, I think, was that you've got to be responsible. You can't just, when you sign with one of the big five, you're still responsible, particularly for the local publicity, which we kind of got good at as with a very small publisher. And Craven, I mean, there weren't a minnow. I mean, they were publishing like Sean Hudson, the horror writer, and a few other quite well known. R.C. Bridgestock with them. But you are responsible because their budget is tiny when it comes to the bigger publishers, and you get used to just taking a bit of responsibility for yourself. So Beth and I, my publicist with Little Brown, when we have the publicity meeting, we'll split up some tasks. So I will do all the local stuff. I will contact local journalists.
Oh, will you?
And things. Yeah, because I know them. I have personal relationships with them, so I can bob them. Like my wife is going out on the piss all day on Saturday with a BBC journalist who I knew from one of the glossy magazines. She's now working with the BBC. So we kind of know them, and companies are so small. You do have these personal relationships. So I know half a dozen that I can just call. I can text and say, look, I've got this coming out. I've got some news next week. If you want to use it, I can give you a quote, that kind of thing. So I will do all that local stuff. I'll tend to arrange all the local shops as well, signings at local shops. So I mean, how we work. Publication week is my week, I say, because I can do 3 of them. I mean, my launch for the Mercy Chair, it was June this year, and it was a 250 seat venue, and it sold out in 36 hours. So wow. I don't need Beth involved for that. It kind of does itself. So I say publication week is my week, Beth. We'll do, and we're actually going to run 3 big events this week in different parts of the county. The week after is your week, so you can send me wherever you want to sort of do whichever strategy you want. So we kind of do work for that, and I think a lot of that came from working with an independent start when you've got to take responsibility for it. And I've never lost that. We still do our own advertising. So I've scribbled all over this, but we have beer mats, which we get into local pubs. And they've got like the book cover on the front and then like a QR code on the back, which just things like that, which we pay for. We have bookmark packs and things. So we still spend a little bit of money on things that my publisher just wouldn't see immediately connect the value. So, I mean, the Mercy Chair's out in paperback tomorrow, actually, Thursday. And they've got ads running in railway stations. They're doing this weird thing where if you walk past this electronic ad with your phone open, it'll capture your data, then it'll start bombarding you with ads. So,
oh my God.
It's very sinister, but yeah.
No, I don't know how I feel about that one. I'm like, you're like, oh yeah, electronic billboard, cool. You're like, yeah, capture your data. I'm like,
Yeah, I'm exactly the same. It sounds a bit Minority Report, doesn't it? But so that kind of thing, I wouldn't know how to do. This year, for a bit of fun, there's a big, massive billboard that we drive past, a big electronic thing in Carlisle. And we thought it'd be excellent just to have a Mercy Chair one for that. Now, Little Brown won't pay for that because they won't advertise in Cumbria because there's no need, because I'm everywhere in Cumbria anyway. I'm like a fungal rash. But I thought that'd be fun. So we actually paid for an ad on this big billboard, which we could drive past every day. And I ran competitions, take your photograph with this under the billboard and win a bookmark pack and that kind of thing. So we still do that. And I know a lot of authors, kind of equivalent to where I'm at now, and a bit below, a bit above maybe, don't do that. They kind of leave it all to their publicists and get angry that they don't have the reach and they don't have all this and that, and they see some of these things and they wonder why perhaps they're not getting the exposure that they feel. I think doing a lot for yourself there's still a lot to be said for that.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, do you think it's important for not just us, or actually it's important for, like, I say, mid-list people who've got 3 or 4 books out, but you think it's more important for new writers who are just the debuts to understand that? Because you hear so many stories, even when I've, been doing this podcast, and I always say the moments that don't make it that aren't published when we carry on talking afterwards. And there's always a story of disappointment because they didn't get what they thought they was going to get, whether it's in mainly in terms of advertising and being promoted and seeing the billboards. So if you feel like they need to be aware that you should not be afraid to take on things for yourself and just,
I think there's that,
especially in your local area.
Yeah, absolutely. I also think publishers have a responsibility to do a bit of expectation management.
Yeah.
Because when you are a aspiring author and you see other authors with billboards on the tube and all these big fancy ads, you can think that, well, I'll have that as well. That everyone gets that level of service, and of course we both know that you don't. And I'm thinking specifically of that. Of course, you're at Harrogate this year. The airport departure lounge that Richard Osman had in one of the rooms.
I'm only laughing.
Just to stroke his ego, really, wasn't it? Because he doesn't need the exposure. But that hardly anyone is going to get something like that. You just not. So doing the local stuff. Because if you can get a local base of readers, then those readers will just spread out. So when it came to my first contract with Little Brown, I've had like half a dozen contracts now, or 5 or something. I already had a base of local readers through my first series with Caffeine Nights, because I'd put in those like hard yards and I'd made little connections. I've been to bookshops and things. And when it came to a press release, I was able to share the press release with the contacts I'd made and say, oh, look, we've got something a bit different coming, albeit it's exactly the same. The story of the puppet show was actually going to be the 3rd story in the Fluke series, but we don't really.
Oh, was it really?
Yeah. It was when David said, I need you to write me a new series because the first one hasn't sold very well at all, because you were the independent publisher, and all publishers I will be submitting to will have access to that data, so they won't want to continue with that series. I need you to write a new series, but set it in Cumbria and kind of keep it the same. So I thought, well, I might as well just use the same story. But I built up those contacts, and I wasn't starting from nothing. And that's the biggest bit of advice I will give new authors is do the work, do the things that your publicist won't be able to do, which is to get in at the micro level. Let them do the macro, you do the micro. And I can't imagine not doing that, to be honest.
No, I say the same thing to when I was doing mentoring. And even if, debuts, like they get in touch with me, and I'll say, don't be afraid to just go out there on your own, because it's unavoidable. You're always going to be looking at what's going on around you and what debut X had in comparison to what you've had. And I think I had expectations, but they didn't even just get muted, they just got demolished because my book came out in lockdown. So it's like I didn't have all the expectations. Yes, all the expectations I had, I'm like, it's not going to happen. So I kind of didn't have. Why didn't I have X, Y, and Z? Because no one had any of those things. Yeah. But I always say to just new authors, remember, it is a business. I don't mean to burst your bubble, because we all, we care about our craft and our art and stuff, but it is a business, and anything you can do for yourself, do it for yourself.
I've started recommending that authors who are just about to come out or are just out but haven't made any kind of impact yet, they go to their local Waterstones, their local independent, and they say, I'm happy to interview authors for you at no charge. And because publishers are always looking to save a book, and because I've just been asked to go and do Rob Parker's debut in Manchester next year, which I would have done for free because he's a mate. But Bloomsbury are paying 150 quid. If Bloomsbury can save 150 quid, and travel for me is not cheap because I'm in Cumbria and I only travel by helicopter. But if you've got your little Waterstones, because a lot of the Waterstone staff don't have the time, or actually some of them don't like doing it. If they have an author to call on who can do a semi-decent job of interviewing someone like Peter James or someone like that, because Peter James tours local independent bookshops and things. You're meeting Peter James, you're making connections with his publicist and Peter James himself, you're making connections with the bookshop. you're kind of in their good books. They're more likely to do you a favour when you come round. Like, do you mind if I have my lunch in Waterstones, that kind of thing. There's a lot of things you can do that are proactive, that don't cost you anything. But on the flip side of that, a lot of authors are very shy, and it's quite difficult to approach someone. But to be a successful author, unless you're just going to have unless you're going to just be Mick Herron, who is quite a shy guy, although he's very funny on stage, then you're going to have to get over that somehow, and either just be the best author there's ever been, so that your words do speak for themselves, which, quite frankly, that voice comes around once in a generation. You have to get out and let people know that you exist, that you're there.
Because times have changed now. And I say times have changed. I mean, if the exception of Mick Herron and a few others, you can't really be an author just sitting in your room. Like you need that. So that social media is there, and people have certain expectations. So I always say to you, you don't need to be everywhere. You don't need to be on every single platform. But I think you should pick one that kind of resonates with your personality.
Yeah,
bit.
Absolutely.
And
because I like a lot of people have moved across to Blue Sky, and I'm thinking of deleting Twitter completely, which will be a shame because I've got like 22,000 followers. But I thought, well, I can't make that decision unilaterally now. I've got to check with Little Brown and with my publisher in the US as well, Flatiron in the US, because this potentially could affect them as well if I've got one less platform, if they see it as... I mean, they're both happy for me to come off, mainly because of the engagement has just dropped down to virtually zero on Twitter. I had just I had allowed Little Brown access to my Facebook page. They wanted access to run analytics and things because they are gonna put money into my Facebook page and build up that kind of thing, that gets a lot of engagement on there. I think Instagram is fun. Instagram works. Blue Sky, I think, is a lot of fun at the minute, and I think that'll probably grow. And I'd like to be there when it does. And the Facebook account is good for a lot of the local stuff as well. But you're absolutely right. You can't just assume that you're going to be the one who doesn't go on social media. No, there's only Mick Herron. Only one person's allowed at any one time. That's Mick Herron at the minute. He's not allowed.
Yeah, I can't think of.
Everyone else has to be.
Yeah, he
doesn't even have a TV though.
Person. No, all he told me about his phone. I was like, "Is that it? Is that what you're using?" And he's like,
basically a pigeon.
He's lovely. That's a pigeon. No, I deactivated my Twitter. It would be nearly a month. I'm sure it's coming up to a month now. But again, I mean, I think I had like 5,000-6,000 followers, something like that. But it was the engagement, and I thought if the engagement's not there, I can't be waiting all the other stuff. I can't be wasting my time. And I like Blue Sky. I post my pictures on Insta and then just see how it goes. Before I go on to like your US series, did the success of the puppet show, did that surprise you?
Well, commercially, it wasn't a massive success. I mean, it did all right. David made it the book of the month, so it sold 1,000 copies straight away. But
snap a finger.
I mean, it's quite handy having David as the agent. To be fair, actually, sorry, it was 750 copies then. That's what's the book of the month. I think it's 1,500 now if you book of the month.
Yeah.
I mean, if you sell another 100 on top of that, you've got a very good chance of making
Sunday Times.
It was so commercially, what it did all right. It did all right in the supermarkets, the paperback. Black Summer did better, and then the creator did it every book has sold more than the previous book. The award came as a massive shock. I really wasn't expecting to win the Gold Dagger for the puppet show. When I got longlisted, that was blimey, I mean, fell off my seat. Not literally. You know when someone gives you bad news, you say, "Are you sitting down?" But, well, how many people are standing up and they fall on the
There's not many few people like. Usually I'm sitting down.
They're falling over because like someone's pranged the car or something like that. So when I went to the awards, when it got shortlisted, which was a big shock, I wasn't actually going to go to the awards, but then we decided we'll best do. And David said, "Have you written your speech?" And I said, "No, I don't think I'm going to win." And he said, "I do. I think Black Summer's a brilliant book." And I said, "Black Summer's not up for it. It's the puppet show." And he went, "Oh, shite." So I thought, well, you've got a lot of confidence in this as well. So I didn't bother.
Your own agent.
Even thinking about it, yeah. And when I got called out, I had absolutely nothing prepared at all. I mean, it's on YouTube. Ali Karim filmed it, the bastard, and it's an absolute car crash of a speech. In fact, when because I won the Steel Dagger for Dead Ground 3 years after. And my wife had put a speech in my pocket just in case, because I was up against Sean Cosby. And I thought, well, he's going to win, so I don't need to prepare anything again.
You don't do anything.
Exactly. So when I got called up, I thought, shite. So I walked up and I think, right, my wife's speech is in my pocket. And it was, apologise for last year's speech and get off the stage as quickly as possible. So I actually read it out and I said, that's good advice. Thank you, agent. Thank you, editor. I'm aware.
Off you go.
But then I kind of wised up. So when the botanist was shortlisted for the Steel Dagger the year after, and I thought, well, actually, I think this might win this. So I had thought about a speech.
Really, you had about? You thought?
I did, yeah. I did. I was confident because the botanist at that point I think was probably the most accessible book. It was fun. Everything kind of worked, and it didn't win. To the point I was so surprised, I actually almost stood up to go and accept someone else's award.
You're like the Oscars, you know, when they have you see everyone else.
Yeah.
They've got to do the face. I think Samuel L. Jackson, was it Pulp Fiction? He got nominated, and I think, oh my God, I know my head who won, but it's gone out of my head. But and they went to his face, and he just went shit because he didn't win his Best Supporting Actor.
Yeah. But I mean, a couple of months later, I was at Harrogate for the Thixton's Award, and David didn't even bother coming. He said, "Oh, it's Ellie Griffiths going to win it this year."
Yeah.
And everyone thought Ellie Griffiths was going to win because she'd been shortlisted like 5 times and hadn't won it. And in the tent, everyone was quite chilled about it, apart from I won't say who, apart from one author who well, I won't even say.
We'll say it after.
Yeah, I will. And you know who I'm talking about anyway. So we were all having a laugh, and we were quite. It was because I knew most of the people that were being shortlisted. It was like Fiona Cummins and Doug Johnson, and so having a bit of a laugh, and then they did the old. Everyone gets on stage and does the speech thing, kind of thing. And so this is the shortlisted book. This is the next shortlisted book, and then and this is the winner. But before we're going to do the winner, we've got a special, highly commended award this year, and it goes to Ellie Griffiths. And I thought, oh shite! It was, the 5 people who were expecting Ellie to win all stiffened up, thinking, oh,
yeah, it's like, it could be me.
It's game on now. But it's such a short thing. I thought, I need to think of something to say. I've got like a minute, just in case it is me. So I kind of got away with it because I just sort of, well, I just did. But that was so. I have never expected to win an award I've won, and I've always expected to win the awards that I didn't. So I'm just going to go through life assuming that the worst is going to happen, and then just hope the best does.
You know what? It's not a bad way to roll through life, though.
Well, it's about managing your expectations as well, isn't it? I mean, I've been lucky, very lucky, I think, to win 3 of the major awards.
Extremely.
But I certainly don't take it for granted. And if I don't win an award again ever, then that'll be absolutely fine, because there are some incredible writers out there who are writing books far better than mine. I mean, it's just, do you think you've just got to...
I was going to say, do you think like the crime writers, crime fiction, do you see it changing with crime writers who are coming in now? Is it good to see?
I'm enjoying some of the newer voices coming in.
Yeah.
I'm enjoying some of the ways they are approaching. So like Joe Callahan's book, I thought was a good approach to getting AI into crime in a positive way. There's a lot of interesting stuff coming out. I'm a bit wary about AI as a way of writing crime books, because I think there was in the bookseller last week or the week before about a company that's going to, an AI company. Yeah, them ones who are going to publish 8,000 books a year. And they're saying they're going to just do the editing via AI, but really, eventually they will be writing AI books and they'll just be putting it out thousands of books a year, and each one just might make 1,000, might sell 1,000 copies. But if you're putting out enough books, 1,000 times 100,000 or something, it's a lot of money. There's money to be made. I think the Crime Writers Association adding 2 new daggers for next year, I thought that was an interesting move. The psychological thriller and was it a cozy one? I can't remember.
Yeah, it's a cozy one.
The 2 new daggers. I thought that was interesting because I think cozy crime has traditionally had a bit of a I've only seen as kind of inferior, but it hasn't been taken as seriously. A bit like comedy films aren't taken as seriously at the Oscars, and that kind of thing. And the psychological thing, I think that was an interesting one actually, because you could argue that that doesn't need its own dagger. If it's a good psychological book, it should be able to stand on its own. It's not as distinct as the historical dagger, for example, which is very clearly, it's got the parameters are very clearly defined. But I think broadening the appeal, broadening the daggers is a very positive thing. I think Vassim has been a breath of fresh air to his sort of stewardship of the Crime Writers Association. But yeah, I've got a lot of time for Vassim.
Yeah.
Anyway,
he's great.
I mean, actually, he is. When I first signed with Little Brown, David Headley did, and he does it every now and then, Crime in the Court, which is like a group of crime writers just go and listen to David do a speech. They drink some of his warm wine and they chat to each other on Cecil Court. And he said, "Look, Christina, your editor's coming to this." And I hadn't actually met Christina at this point, other than when I went down to London to discuss whether she would buy the publisher.
Yeah.
And she said, "I think you should come." So we trooped down and we didn't know anyone. And Vassim saw me and my wife just standing on our own. And he came and spent like an hour with us. So he's just like one of the nicest men.
He is.
You can ever meet. And he's so helpful and he's so thoughtful as well. And he's an incredibly intelligent man. He just comes across in the way he talks. Far better than the drivel I do when I'm talking in public.
I'm going to see him later. I'm going to tell him I'll pass on all these compliments to him. I'll say, "Mike, you're singing your praises."
Yeah, I'll just say I was drunk.
I'll say you was very drunk on my podcast. Right, before I go on to like your book that's coming up, and the last set of questions, why did you do the switch to your US Marshal series? Was it something you wanted to do, or you just thought, "No, I just need a change"? No,
this is such a weird thing because it kind of takes everyone by shock. My Ben Koenig series, the first one, predates the Poe series.
Yeah,
it actually predates the second Fluke book. It was actually the second thing I wrote. And
does it really?
Yeah, I finished it while I was still in probation. I was writing it at lunchtimes, and I left probation in 2015, and it was definitely finished by then. When I went down to the daggers in 2013 for the debut dagger, I was on the same table as Lee Child's publicists, and they said, "Do you want to meet Lee Child?" And I was like, "Blimey. Do you think you'll talk to me?" He said, "Yeah, he's a lovely man."
He's very nice.
So at the end of the dinner, they came and dragged him over, and he spent about half an hour with me. Lovely man, very intelligent, very eloquent, and he just said, "Where you at in your journey?" I said, "Well, I was up for the debut dagger, didn't win, but unpublished, unagented. I didn't have an agent. What advice have you got?" And he said, "What do you write?" And I said, "Police procedural set in Cumbria." He said, "Well, do you like that?" And I said, "Well, yeah, it's okay." We said, "My advice is to try something different, discover, try a different style of writing, maybe set it somewhere you haven't been to, just have a play about it, and then settle on something you enjoy writing, because when you enjoy what you're writing, it'll shine through." So I thought, well, I'll just put Lee Child, I'm going to write a Jack Reachery kind book set in the US, and I'm going to do it in the first person rather than the third person. And I did that, and I found it quite difficult. particularly the first person thing. I kept on slipping tenses. So when I was reading it back the first time, a lot of it was like present tense. So it was weird.
I find it very hard, first person.
Yeah, I don't actually like it. I prefer.
No.
A lot of books are written in the first person. You don't even notice. And that's the sign of an excellent book. So Robert Crace is probably my favourite crime writer. All his books are in the first person. And I barely notice because it's done so well. When it's done badly, it's I did this, I did that. So I finished it and I kind of did nothing with it. 2018, when Christina had bought the puppet show, she was checking what else I'd written. And she realised she was going to have to buy my first series of Caffeine Nights, which she did. So she bought Born in the Borough and Body Breaker. So she basically just doing some admin, said, have you written anything else that is later going to come back and bite me? And I said, well, I've written this stupid thriller that David hasn't read it. And I knew David hadn't read it because of some of the comments he said that you could change it to a UK set thriller. I said, you haven't read it then, because it physically couldn't happen. So she read it and tagged it on the end of whichever contract it was, the Bottomless contract, I think. And the plan was to put it out under a different name, in a dreary paperback only release, just to get it out. Didn't pay a lot of money for it. So that was maybe an 7 or 8 year gap between writing it and it actually getting a deal that I didn't particularly want or had sought in the first place. And then a US publisher, an editor, who was a big fan of the Post series, had been trying to find a way to get me on her list, but couldn't make it work with the Post series because they'd had problems with publishing a series way behind another country because all the press and the blogs have been done and things like that. So they can't, they can't do that debut impact kind of thing. So she grabbed hold of this. It needs a lot of work. I would want it as the first in the series rather than just the standalone mess that it is. It needs a lot of work because you clearly don't understand America. And I didn't, because I hadn't done any research at all, because it was never meant to be published. So I just guessed at things. So I had Ben Koenig driving across Texas in 90 minutes. It's the size of Germany.
Even I know.
Yeah, it takes about 15 hours.
Oh my God, Mike. No.
Well, I thought. I also thought Washington, D.C. was the capital of Washington State.
You know, I'm shaking my head at you. You can't.
Yeah. I can see. So it needed a lot of work, and which I was happy to do, obviously. And I rewrote large parts of it. It took about 6 months, actually, longer to actually edit Koenig for the American market. It does to actually write a Poe book from scratch. And then there was a big Hollywood bidding thing went on. There was like 35 studios like scrambling for it, and there was a whole thing we had to do Zoom meetings with LA, and we had a bidding war went on, and we which got really weird. So the whole profile of the thing got ramped up for the UK market as well, because they weren't going to bother. So suddenly, right, we're going to put the Mercy Chair back a year. We're going to have the Ben Koenig as the 23 release, and it became a whole thing, and it was a Sunday Times bestseller, which nobody was. So now I've kind of got two series that people are enjoying. The Venn diagram of readers is the circles are quite wide apart. The intersection isn't that big. So I mean, it's found its own unique readership. Not many people read both series because they're very different. So that's why I wrote it. It wasn't. I thought I want to do something different, because I would be happy just to keep on writing the Post series. But now I know you're going to get onto this, but what I'm writing now is the third Ben Koenig book. So we'll be announcing the new contract next year. I signed it last month, but we'll be announcing it next year so it doesn't get swallowed up by Christmas news. And one of them was for the new Ben Koenig book. So I'm now kind of stuck writing the series that in a genre that I don't actually read anymore. I don't really read action thrillers anymore. So
it's just crazy. Like, that's, to me, that would be more surprising than a success of Poe, because it's something you wrote so long ago, and you had to complete. You thought you can get across Texas in half an hour. You have to do so much work you have to do with it, and then it just takes. And then Koenig life of its own.
Like ordering black pudding for breakfast and things. Like the editor's going, "What the hell is black pudding?" things like that. It's a strange thing, and I don't know if I'm still happy about it yet, because I do like the Poe series. I love the Poe series. I love the way that's going, and I've got kind of a whole 15-book arc kind of sorted out in my head. And the Koenig series is kind of getting in the way of that in my own head, albeit it's got a massive readership as well, and I need to service that readership. I can't just ignore that, and I can't just say, well, the Koenig's like the lesser cousin. It's like the stepchild. It's not.
I was going to say, it's like an annoying little brother.
It needs to be taken just as seriously. So when I'm writing a Koenig book, I've got to treat it just as I would a Poe book and do it properly and I need to do my research now. So I'll just come back from New York actually to do a bit of research for the Koenig book, and also a standalone which I wrote when nobody asked for it. I've got a standalone coming out at some point, and everyone was going, "What the hell are you doing? You've written another book. Nobody has asked for this book. We're gonna have to buy it now because otherwise someone else will." It's kind of weird, and although now I've got my head around it, when I'm writing the Koenig book, I want to get back to Poe. And when I'm writing Poe, I'm thinking actually I wouldn't mind writing Ben Koenig fighting a bear, which is what I'm writing now. He's actually fighting a bear. Because it'll probably get taken out in the edits. You can just go absolutely nuts with the Koenig series. In the Poe series, you back down to reality to a certain degree.
I think,
but the other tops, you're sort of bound by laws in the UK.
Yeah, I think that's the thing about if you do set stuff in the States, it's so vast, and I always say every state, I think people need to understand it's like its own little country. So you can get away with so much more, I think, than you can with a purely UK set. Obviously, it depends.
And Lee Child said once that he doesn't feel as though he's going over the top because whatever he thinks of in the US, someone's done something worse.
Yeah, I'm sure someone's wrestled with a bear.
Chuck Norris. I mean, I told someone I'm doing a little bit of work with, and he sent me a video of Chuck Norris fighting the bear. So that was.
There's a film, and I'm going off topic. There's a film called Crawl, and it's one of these terrible, action. It's a storm. It's a storm in Florida. There's flooding, and crocodiles or alligators. They go into the house, and the people are trapped in the house, and they're trying to get. I know. I watched it in duress, and I was like, I'm not. And I watched it. I was like, for God's sake! And then when they had the last set of hurricanes in Florida, was there not a guy with his video? It was crocodile flying.
It's absolutely nuts.
The next book out. If I got it right, so it's Final Vow, which is the
Final Vow. Yes,
Tilly.
yes,
yeah.
Do you want Poe and Tilly 7? It was originally called The Third Light, which was it's about a sniper. So it was kind of based on the third light on a match rule. That's superstition that you don't take the third light off a match because it's bad luck. Which goes all the way back to the Boer War, I think, and the first time telescopic sights were used on the battlefield, and snipers would see a light. They would, there's a light, and by the time the third person was taken a light, they'd actually aim in and firing. So that's kind of something in the army. So in the army, when I was in the army for 12 years, you wouldn't take a third light off a match. It was just a weird thing. But because there's a kind of different theme going on, or there's a strong theme of weddings going through the book. They had a very strong cover in mind, and the cover didn't fit the title, so they changed it to The Final Vow, which confused a lot of people. But hopefully, it's all sorted now. Because it was on different formats. It was still The Third Light, and then it was The Final Vow, depending on whether you bought the ebook or the hardback. It's all sorted now. Yeah, The Final Vow. It's out in August.
Are you excited about it? Because book 7.
Yeah,
in that series.
I mean, I kind of always get excited about the Poe series and nervous. I just get nervous about the Koenig series because I'm writing something that I don't actually read myself, and it's very different. I know it's also set in a country I don't know a great deal about, as we've already established. Whereas the Poe series, I'm kind of the authority on the Poe series, which is why I don't mind talking about it and doing all these big events in front of loads of people, because I can't be challenged. It's not like when I used to do these big, because I was an assistant chief probation officer in probation. So I was like managing Cumbria and part of Lancaster. And I would go up and do conferences and things, and I'd be bluffing it. I'd just be bullshitting from the moment I go up, because I hadn't bothered reading the material. Because by then I wanted to be a writer anyway. So I was basically, all my spare time was spent reading books or writing rather than
you're just getting through the day.
Yeah. But I am the authority on Poe and Tilly. What I say is
law.
Is the law, basically. So I'm excited for it, yeah. And the next one after that's already written as well. So I've written book 8, which I don't know when that'll be out. Actually, it needs a little bit of work, but it's written, it's submitted, and I've written a standalone as well. So that's written.
How many are you writing in a year?
I try just to write the one properly, because you're writing one, you can't. But because Fearless was a pre-written book, I kind of gained a year because I didn't have to write a book that year. It took a lot of time to edit, but it still gave me like 6 months of doing nothing. So I wrote that standalone and I caught up on Poe. The last Poe book took me 36 days to get a first draft down. So I'm writing them very quickly. Yeah, I'm writing them very quickly now. Then I edit them a few times and then do a final read through and things.
You've got the bones of it down.
Yeah, from start to finish, I can do it in 6 months comfortably, and that includes like time off to do other stuff.
Yeah. Wow.
I mean, the commitments outside of writing the book are getting bigger and bigger as you go on. So the demands, we're published in 30 languages now. So I mean, there's a lot of demands from foreign publishers. And I was out in the US yesterday for Nobody's Hero. That was their publication day. So I've been doing a lot of Zoom interviews at night for their magazines and press and things. So there's a lot of activities have to go on outside of just physically sitting down to
you learn to balance it,
as you know you do, and you kind of block off bits of time to write. And so like the start of next year, I'm going to be writing solidly from January to April.
Okay.
That's what I kind of blocked off to finish Koenig 3, because I'll have finished Koenig 3 by probably end of Jan.
Yeah, I think the first year I started when I was published, and the first year, does it count? Half of it doesn't count because we were still in COVID. But I think the second year was my first like challenging year of writing, editing, and doing events and getting the balance right. I was so exhausted at the end of that year, and then the following year I was like, I know I need to change things with book 3 because it's too much. It's a lot. Yeah,
it is. I think it's important that you get your books, you get your books written. I think to do that, you've got to manage your time outside the book. So we don't do all the festivals now. So we miss. So I'm not doing Capital Crime next year, and I'm not doing Bloody Scotland. And the year after, I'll do Capital Crime. I'll do Bloody Scotland. I'll do Harrogate every year just because it's a lot of fun. I'm doing Stockport in February. I might not do it the following February. That kind of thing. You just have to manage your time and see your time as a commodity, and that you've only got so much, because you can't just write for 10 hours a day, because your last 3 hours, 4 hours, there'll be absolute gobbledygook, which you have to rewrite anyway. So you might as well stop. I don't know what you're like, but I kind of know when I've had enough for the day.
Oh, I do.
I lose the ability to spell, and I'm just like tapping keys like a monkey trying to do Shakespeare.
I always say words don't look like words to a certain point, and when I'm at that point, I'm like, I'm done. And also, I know how my brain works. I know how I work, and I'm never gonna be, because I've never have been one of these writers or students who'll be working till 2, 3, 4 in the morning. Like that doesn't work for me. So you learn.
No, I don't work early in the morning either. I've got a kind of sweet spot between like 9:30 till about 5:30. When
that's perfect.
I can be quite productive in that time. So I'll do emails and admin things first thing when I can be bothered, and I'll just tap away at my phone at night when I've got like a bit of downtime.
That's me. That is literally my process. I mean, there's been occasions, I think, once I had to be at because I wasn't even in the country, I was in Morocco, and I had to be on my laptop at 6 o'clock, so I had to get my edits out. But that is not something that I would do regularly. No. Not at all. All right. Mike, your last set of questions. Are you an introvert or extrovert or a hybrid of the two?
I think I'm a hybrid. I come across as an extrovert, but I can be quite shy on occasions as well, particularly when I'm in a group and I don't know anyone. Yeah. I find talking to someone I don't know very awkward.
How did you manage at work? Because when you're in probation, it'd be like me. Like, I don't want to talk to you, but you're constantly meeting new people.
Yeah, the thing is, I was very, very shy, like painfully shy, until I was very ill in 2003, and I was told I was going to die. In fact, I was moved to palliative care. It was that kind of deal.
Oh, wow.
So I was like 6 months in hospital, and at that point, I made a decision. It was such a weird thing. I thought, if I actually do survive, I'm not going to be shy anymore.
Yeah.
So I actually made a decision not to be shy. It was such a weird thing, and the first thing is not to care what people think too much. It was so liberating, and so I'm much better at it. Public speaking was just a nightmare for me. It really was.
Yeah.
I absolutely hated it, to the point I didn't apply for certain jobs that I wanted because I knew it would be managing meetings and things like that. I was terrified of it. When I came out of hospital, I was able to manage meetings with the chief constable in attendance and things like that. So I actually made a decision,
a conscious decision. Does that answer the next question then? So what challenge or experience shaped you the most?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, most definitely.
It was, it wasn't so much that I came out because I had like 6 months of chemotherapy, and I had a Zimmer frame. I had like special things on my legs because I couldn't move my ankles. I was a state. So I've been quite physically active before then.
Yeah.
So I actually started to write, and I was going to do an autobiography of what it's like to be in a cancer ward, as to see people just that you see every day, then suddenly they're dead, and just all this horrific. But again, with the black humor, some dead funny things happened. Dead, literally. And when I got off, when I was writing down, I thought, this is a load of rubbish. Who's going to want to read this? But I'll tell you what, because I'm thinking of writing crime, I'm going to give my protagonist the same illness I had.
Yeah.
And I'm going to have him having lied to get back to work. He's hiding all his symptoms, his side effects. And that's the book that got shortlisted for the debut Dagger. So it changed me massively. It did. And also indirectly led to me the dog and a tumour the size of a rugby ball. The two things that led me to being a crime writer.
That's amazing. It's amazing. So if you could go back to when you were 25 years old and give yourself one piece of advice, what would it be?
Probably don't do a bodyguarding course as your pre-release course for the army, because that was like the biggest waste of time. It was something I thought that it was like that or beekeeping, quite frankly. When I left the army, you did a computer program to see what job you would be suited for.
Yeah.
And it took about 2 hours of like answering questions like, what would you rather do? And when I pressed the results, it said soldier, and I thought, well, that was a big fat waste of time. So I now that with beekeeping and bodyguarding, and now I wish I'd done beekeeping.
You've done beekeeping.
But on a more serious note, I think I kind of wasted that opportunity because I could have done A-levels as part of my pre-release course, whereas I didn't know that, because I wanted to do a degree when I got out, and universities wouldn't take me because I didn't have any evidence of recent study at a higher level. So I had to go to college and do A-levels just to get onto my social work course. So I could have actually saved a year, but it's kind of a sliding doors thing, isn't it? You don't know what that might have changed the entire path of my life. So but yeah, it would have been to do my A-levels a year earlier than I did. Nothing massive.
It's all about them sliding door moments.
Don't ignore the lump in your side. That would have been another big one. Don't just think it's just a Scotch head stuck somewhere.
Pay attention to your body and what's going on. So finally, NW Craven, where can listeners of the podcast find you online? You've kind of said though, but you can tell them again.
Yeah, I've got a Facebook page, Twitter for now, Blue Sky, Instagram. What are the other
everywhere?
Ones? All of them. Yeah. Like I say, honestly, I'm like a fungal rash. I'm everywhere. You'll be muting me before long.
I was going to say you're a great rash, but I don't know how that even comes across. It just sounds wrong.
I've got a website. I mean, the website is, because my wife does it, it's up to date and written sensibly rather than just a picture of me holding a pint of beer. So my website always has up to date stuff, and there's a newsletter that my publisher does for me. You can sign up to that via my newsletter, via my website. So just the usual thing, nothing extraordinary.
Nothing extraordinary. Well, MW Craven, that just leaves me to say thank you so much, and it's been an absolute joy. Thank you so much for being on The Conversation.
Thank you, Nadine. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to today's conversation with Nadine Matheson. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Be sure to tune in every Tuesday for a brand new episode featuring more amazing guests. Don't forget to like, subscribe and leave a review. It really helps the podcast grow. And if you'd like to support the show, you can buy me a cup of coffee or sign up on Patreon. The links are in the show notes. And if you'd love to join the conversation as a guest, feel free to send an email to theconversation@nadinematheson.com. Thanks again for your support, and I'll catch you next time.